Today we're surveying a late 1980s Freedom 35 sailing yacht, designed by American Jerry Hoyt, built in reasonable numbers from about 1981 onwards. And Freedom 35s were laid out with end grain balsa cord hulls from around about the deck level down to just around about the waterline. Now, end grain balsa cord wood is not the best material to use when water starts getting into it, because it turns to mush eventually. So what we found today is some high-level moisture readings, which I'll share with you, and also some percussion testing, so you can get a feel for the difference in sound between a dry balsa core substrate and a wet balsa core substrate, and the difference is quite remarkable. So let's get stuck in.
The main surveying tool we use for percussion testing is the hammer. Now, I have 4 hammers in my toolbox for percussion testing, and from top to bottom these are the toffee hammer, a lightweight hammer for testing FRP hulls below the waterline, the barge basher, a heavyweight hammer for testing steel barges and narrowboats, the Nick Faldo, great for testing fiberglass topsides and decks without leaving any marks, and finally the George Gently, a soft face hammer for hitting everything else. If you don't have a hammer to hand, you can pretty much use any solid object to percussion test the structure. The handle of a screwdriver, a Bic lighter or a wooden spoon will all work to varying degrees of success. I prefer wooden shaft hammers, as the feel I get after a strike is better and more consistent. No matter what you use though, the principle remains the same. It's all about adjusting your ear and what you feel in your hand to the tool you are using and the structure you are testing.
Remember, the principle behind percussion testing is quite simple. We take a suitably sized hammer, in this case a golf ball on a stick, because it's lightweight, doesn't mark the top sides. We hit the subject of interest. We put energy in, some of that comes back as a bounce, and some of it gets turned into noise, and a tiny bit goes to heat. And this is what hidden solid rudder, crisp laminate.
And if we listen carefully to the noise we get when we're tapping the hull, we can start to pick out internal structures such as frames, stringers and bulkheads. And here I've identified the main mast bulkhead between the saloon and the forward cabin. And of course that presents a hard spot because the ply sheet that forms the shape of the bulkhead internally is glass tabbed into the hull structure. So when we pass the hammer over it, you get a really clear hard sound and a hard spot, and the energy that comes back to you is much greater because it's a harder surface. And you'll see that as we move on, and I tap either side of it, you'll hear how it's softer, the return is lower, but around the bulkhead the return is much higher. So that's how we can identify where the bulkheads are using the hammer.
Here I found a small bullseye crack pattern, only about 200mm across, but listen to the sound of the ball as I traverse across that. You notice the real difference in the sound, particularly around the outside edges, which is where the bullseye crack pattern is, and that's where the damage is in the laminate, in this case the outer skin of a balsa core grained hull.
Now here we're about to percussion test down the port side of the hull above the waterline. You can see we're around about 3.5 meters after the bow, just after that main bulkhead that's in line with the mast. And what you're going to listen for is a very crisp sounding uniform return. So there's very little variation in the sound we're getting and the return we're getting, which shows me that the laminate is good, but also the core material inside is also good. So let's see what that sounds like. So now we're going to percussion test down the starboard side, and I've started ahead of the mast bulkhead where you'll hear the return is crisp and solid, and as I slowly move aft you'll notice we go past the bulkhead, that hard crisp return that we're expecting, and then from there the sound just gets worse and worse and probably reaches its worst at around about the 5.5-6 meter station mark. You can hear it's really quite dull, quite a deeper sound, much more of a thud, and as I go past that and work my way towards the other end it starts to pick up again. That's percussion testing done. Now let's move on to moisture testing, and to do that I'll use my Tramex Skipper Plus moisture meter. Moisture meters work by measuring the electrical impedance of a material using a low frequency alternating magnetic field, and it converts that into a readout here, which is, rather than trying to read the numbers off the screen, I'll say it's the green, amber or red, so low, medium or high. Now as we go down the port side, all is good, and then you'll notice I'll turn the moisture meter sideways, and that's where we're looking at the moisture behind a repair. You tell it by the different gel coat, so let's see what that looks like. So here we are, low readings, port side, low, medium, medium, medium. Now we're getting close to the repair, and you'll see they pick up quite a bit into the red, medium, red. Turn it over, see if we can do vertically, go medium, high, high. So you can see how the moisture content is much greater behind that previous repair. So again, low, medium, high. So moisture testing on the starboard side, starting ahead of the bulkhead, low, low, medium, past the bulkhead, and now it gets wet very quickly. So off the scale, saturated core behind that thing into that little damage area. Again, all saturated stuff. Carrying along down the waterline, red, off the scale. Let's move all the way back to where we almost think it finishes out. Above the waterline, still very high, deep into the red scale. And now if we go up, you'll notice it drops off relatively quickly. Now once we're past what I think is the end of the waterline moisture, so medium, up above, and then now as you move back towards the centre where it's at its wettest, you'll see the average readings start to climb. There we go, we're up with the reds and off the scale.
Looking to one of the storage cupboards in the saloon, you can see where the balsa coring starts up here and carries on down to just around about the waterline. Tapers off to nothing here, and then here you can see these are fixings for the large wooden rubbing strake, which are fitted through that. So the moisture readings on the outside were very high, and I brought my moisture meter inside and put it in here as well, and we get equally high readings. Put it on there, you can see it pegs straight off the scale. So fully saturated core inside the whole top side. So we're above the waterline here, don't forget. Moving further forward, same story. And here we are in the next space forward, just starting to ease off a little bit, and then just here at the left hand end, this is the forward cabin bulkhead. So here the bulkhead goes through to the exterior, so the balsa core stops here and then starts again on the other side. Let's go look in there and see what moisture readings we get in there. Unfortunately we can't get any readings inside because it's been carpeted, but certainly outside you can tell where we had the bulkhead marking, the moisture levels drop straight off. Percussion testing is like having a little portable electro mini machine in your hand, which when you tie in with the moisture meter and what you see with the Mark 1 eyeball, you can really start to get a good feel for what's going on inside the laminate of any hull. Building a laminate structure with a core material such as end-grain balsa or closed cellular foam is a good idea. You get a lot more strength for a lot less weight. So it's a great thing to do. However, it does come with some downsides once the moisture starts to get in. And certainly end-grain balsa suffers more than closed cell foam in this regard. Hope you found it useful and instructive. Be sure to subscribe to my boat chat newsletter, which comes out once or twice a month, as and when I can fit it in around the work. It's all things boaty for all things people like to do with boats. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.